I'm going to hit the mute button also so that we only pick up our worship leaders. And then Linda, you'll have to re-unmute, okay?
Okay, welcome to this online service for First Parish Church of Kingston, Massachusetts. We have a prelude for our guest minister, Reverend Erin Walter, who is also a musician. A word about today's music. Reverend Erin has chosen a variety of styles, from rock and roll to spiritual to an orchestra choir piece, in the hopes of reaching people's spirits in different ways. When you hear the prelude and the anthem by Parker Woodland, you are hearing Reverend Erin's voice and lyrics as she leads the band. FYI, the opening hymn is at a low volume, so you'll want to crank up the sound on your device. The anthem is louder, so you may want to adjust the volume down. You are always invited to sing and dance along from home. Your spirit will be felt even if on mute.
Joan, we're not getting sound. Can you stop and restart the share, please? Joan, I think we're getting the sound through your microphone, but no video. So Joan, can you go ahead and hit stop? And we have multiple Zoom hosts this morning, so we're going to try it from Kathy Kay's computer and see if it comes through a little more clearly. We'll pass it around. I say often, it's always a team effort to create worship, and that is still true in these times.
Absolutely. And may I just say, coming from Austin, Texas, where live music is everything, and our spirits have been aching to not be able to do it, to be able to share music with you this way, even with technical struggles, is the greatest gift. And I appreciate your efforts.
There's a feeling I can't describe what it is to be alive, and no matter how I try, it escapes me. Heart set afire, glowing, crackling wild. It stops me in my tracks, yeah, it wakes me, and I say, ooh, lift me up.
Our guest minister today is Reverend Erin Walter. Reverend Erin J. Walter, she, her, hers, is a minister, activist, and musician based in Austin and winner of the 2017 Sermon Award from the UU Women's Federation. A former YMCA director, Reverend Erin is the singer-songwriter for the band Parker Woodland, whose music you'll hear in this service. She serves as a board member for the Texas Unitarian Universalist Justice Ministry and the affiliated community minister of Wildflower, Unitarian Universalist Church in Austin. You can find more about her music and ministry at erinwalter.com. We light our chalices today with these words from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose life and ministry we celebrate tomorrow. This is where we are. Where do we go from here? First, we must massively assert our dignity and worth. We must stand up amidst a system that still oppresses and develop an unassailable and majestic sense of values. What is needed is the realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. And this is what we must see as we move on. May the light of our flames guide us to use our power to do the work of love and justice in our country and this world.
Good morning. Thank you for that beautiful reading for our chalice lighting. And I want to thank Reverend Monica for having me here in her virtual pulpit. We went to seminary together, and it's just a delight to be here. Our call to worship words are going to be spoken, and the whole service for me led from my daughter's bedroom. I tell folks we've learned this year that church really is everywhere. Our work in the world is everywhere. And I choose this room because it has the most sparkle and the best Wi-Fi, which I think is what this pandemic year needs, among other things. Our call to worship words come from a great Unitarian Universalist leader, Elandria or E. Williams. They were a Black UU leader who grew up in our faith and passed at age 41 last year. Elandria served in our highest volunteer role as co-moderator of the Unitarian Universalist Association from August 2017 to 2020. And if that name Elandria Williams is new to you, I highly encourage you to look them up after the service and bask in their wisdom and legacy. This is an excerpt from We Are Worthy. We are worthy not because of what we produce, but because of who we are. We are divine bodies of light and darkness. You are not worthy because of what you offer, not because of what is in your mind, nor for the support you give others, not for what you give at all. We are worthy and we are whole just because. Welcome again to worship. Our opening hymn, which again has a kind of a low volume, so crank it up if you haven't yet, is Shine on Me, a spiritual sung by musical activist UU Melanie DeMoore. And I chose it, it's one of my favorites, inviting us to think about how we might be a lighthouse for others and how we might sing along even without words, even without hymnals. I grew up UU and we're pretty attached to our hymnals. And so anything we can do to kind of liberate our spirit and music, Melanie is going to lead us in this song. So really listen to her guidance and just sing along.
Hello, you family. I'm going to sing a song with you called Shine on Me. It's an amazing spiritual that anybody can sing. And in these days when the things that we're dealing with, the feeling separate and all of that, and things seem so hard, this is one of those songs that you just throw your head back, put it in your medicine kit. All you have to do is ask. And here's how it goes. Shine on me, oh shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me, oh shine on me, yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me. Lift me up, oh, lift me up. Let the light from the lighthouse lift me up, oh, lift me up, yes, lift me up. Let the light from the lighthouse lift me up, oh, hold me close, yes, hold me close. Let the light from the lighthouse hold me close, yes, hold me close, oh, hold me close. Let the light from the lighthouse, please, hold me close. Oh, shine on me, yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me, oh, shine on me, yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on All you have to do is just ask. The light is always there. Always. Always. Love you.
Good morning, everybody. So good to be with you again and to see your faces and to have Reverend Erin here with us. We heard this beautiful song just now from Melanie Demore about being a light for others and allowing light to shine on us. But for just a few moments, I would like to talk about darkness, which we're hearing a lot about these days, aren't we? We're hearing that this is a dark time. And because of what we've been taught about darkness, we know what it means for someone to call something a dark time. We know it means that it is a frightening time, a hard time, a time of sadness, And for many of us, the terms dark and darkness are code words for these things: hard, scary, sad. But there are people who are helping us to think differently about these words and to use them differently and to think about what it can be to be in the sort of challenging time that we are used to calling a dark time. One of these people for me is Barbara Brown Taylor, and some of you might know who she is. She is a writer and minister, and over the past few months, I've been reading a lot of her work. It's been really helpful to me, and I've been really appreciating what she has to say about the dark. She says that although we're used to thinking of it as a frightening place, it's also something else. It's the place where growing begins. Every single thing that grows, from seeds to babies, begins here in the dark. She encourages us to see what might be growing in us during the times that we might be used to calling dark times, to think about what we can learn here in these times. She says, be curious about your own darkness. You might be afraid. You might want to turn away to get as far from it as you can. And that makes sense. But just for a moment, be curious about what's there. She wrote a book called Learning to Walk in the Dark. And in that book, she gives us a few questions which form a kind of meditation to help us be curious together about darkness. And I thought we could try it here for just a few moments together. So I invite you to get comfortable, whatever that means for you, to close your eyes and to get quiet inside. The first question that Barbara Brown Taylor asks us is, what are you afraid of? And this time, what is frightening you? And you might want to turn away from that. That is normal. But what can you learn about your fear by staying with it for a moment, for sitting with it before you turn on the lights, before you turn away? Where can you feel this fear in your body? Where is it located in you? Is it in your stomach? Is it sitting in the bottom of your throat? Are you feeling tension in your shoulders? Where is it for you? When have you felt this way before? What are you afraid is going to happen to you? What is your mind telling you to do about this? What stories are you telling yourself that help to keep your fear here? And she asks, what helps you even in this place, even when you're scared and challenged? What have you learned in the dark that you never could have learned in the light without this challenge? I invite you to carry these questions with you into the coming week. I'll put them in the chat so that you can turn to them anytime. Our meditation has now ended, so I invite you to open your eyes and come back to this moment. Thanks so much for joining me in this. And now I'll turn things back over to Linda so she can introduce our offering.
At this time in our service, we receive an offering to support the work of this congregation. We are part of a web of interdependence with each other and all that lives. One practice that affirms this truth is the sharing of our resources. When we give to the offering, we recognize the gifts that have come to us, and we practice joining together to do more than any one of us could do separately. You may contribute to the offering using the online giving link, text to give, or by mailing a check to the church office. All the giving information can be found in your email order of service. Please know that what you give will be most gratefully received. Our offertory music today is hymn number 55, Dark of Winter. This hymn continues inviting us to think about what the dark nurtures in us, building on the time for all ages we have just shared with Jen. And we are not doing number 1031 as listed in the order of service, not today.
Dark of winter, soft and still, your quiet calm surrounds me. Let my thoughts go where they will, ease my mind profoundly, and then my soul will sing a song, a blessed song of love eternal. Gentle darkness, soft and still, bring your quiet to me. Darkness, soothe my weary eyes, that I may see more clearly. When my heart with sorrow cries, comfort and caress me, and that my soul may hear a voice, a still small voice of love eternal. Darkness, when my fears arise, let your peace flow through me.
All blessings on your gifts and blessings on you as givers. So again, thank you for having me this morning. I have been in my own grappling with darkness, and a silver lining of this time is getting to go all around the country and even to Canada. I was in Canada last week for worship, thanks to technology. In our service today, we are talking about light and dark, and we are talking about the idea of how we face the hardships and struggles head on, and not turn away from what is real and what needs our attention, while also finding ways to stay joyful and to have practices that nourish us for this long road. And so I'm going to share with you an anthem that is kind of woven into the sermon, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit first, and then we'll rock out together, and then there'll be more sermon. The video that you're going to see for the anthem, the song is called The World's on Fire and We Still Fall in Love. So there's that hardship and good stuff. And this video is very precious to me. It actually just premiered this week, but it's the last time that I had my community in my home and before the pandemic struck. And to me, letting people into your home, letting people into your mess, welcome, it's one of the things that is just so important to be able to do. And I like to remind people, I heard this once and it really struck a chord with me, that we're always comparing our messy insides with everybody else's shinier outsides. And that's especially true during this time where a lot of our lives are on social media and on screens. So we may be wrestling with all kinds of things inside, and it may look like everybody else is doing just fine. And that's why it's important to let people into what is real. And one of the things that I loved about making this video is my friend who directed it. She's an artist and a musician named Jazz Mills, who during this pandemic, she started something called Free Lunch ATX that makes healthy home cooked meals for folks who are living on the streets here in Austin. And I asked her, I said, you know, how much should I clean up before we let people in? And she said, don't clean up. You want it to look like people have been having a party in your house. And that was a big relief. So I did not clean up. So you'll see that too. And we can't invite people into our homes in the same way right now, can we, right? With this pandemic, and that's very painful. And at the same time, we can think about how might we invite people in other ways. And so as you listen to this song, and hopefully you'll catch on and you'll be able to sing along at least to the chorus, I also invite you to look at my community, look at the many, many joy practices you're going to see in 3.5 minutes, and ask yourself, if you were making sort of a last snapshot of your beloveds and your life, what would it look like? What joy practices would you want to throw in this video if it were you? And then I want you to think about how could you throw more of that into your life in 2021, okay? So we're gonna watch this video. Welcome again to my home. And remember, you might want to turn it down a little bit.
It's a hard time to look for hope when the truth can feel like a joke or worse. They tell you it's your fault if you trust. But there's one thing I know, it's this: opposites do coexist, and the last thing they'll ever kill is love. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we're not giving up. No, no, I could let you go, say it's not worth it. Oh, I could give up before we know. And what's the use in having hope? And even though everything's wrong and it shows, I still look at you and I know one thing could be perfect. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we're not giving up. No, no. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we're not giving up. No, no. I don't wanna be naive, but I catch myself wanting to believe, and I think I could take a risk this time. It's a hard time to look for hope when the truth can feel like a joke or worse. They tell you it's your fault if you try. World's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we're not giving up. No, no. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love. The world's on fire and we'll still fall in love.
So I see that, and I remember what we're fighting for. I remember what it feels like to be in community together, to hug people, to cook for people, to dance together in person. I will tell you that some of the people in that video have had COVID, and I've been praying for their recovery, just as I am for those of you who have been struggling with this. And I know that there's no community that isn't struggling with this right now. I will tell you that I left the hand paint that the kids put on my glass doors for 6 months because I didn't want to let it go. So it's hard to see that and miss those people so much. Some of those people I haven't seen in 10 months. And others of them are my neighbors, and we have been getting each other through with socially distanced walks, with blowing bubbles in the street. You know, you saw all of those joy practices, right? Game nights across Zoom, wigs. I have a friend who wears a wig to every virtual thing. So there's a lot of joy in there, and a lot of those tools are what have been getting us through. And what I hope in sharing that with you is also to offset some of the horrific video that we've seen in the last couple weeks, in particular with the attempted coup and the insurrection violence that we saw in DC. I want to tell you some of the things that I saw. And I try not to expose myself to too much. I try not to just sit there with the news. I don't think that's a good spiritual practice for me. And I felt like I needed to see what people were seeing. I saw mobs of people calling for the hanging of Mike Pence. And I can only imagine what that felt like for people, Black people in our country in particular, whose families and histories are not far removed at all from the history of hanging and lynching. I saw a white mob using heave ho, collective energy to try and break through and causing hurt for the officers and the people who were trying to maintain safety. I saw women having the presence of mind to carry the electoral votes for relatively young female aides, carrying those votes out to safety. And I also saw an anchor as he was sharing all of this hard news, violence, horror. He was doing a beautiful job of naming it, of talking about the white supremacist ideology that runs through all of it. He was really naming what was going on. And at the same time, he said what he warned people as he was about to share sort of a video montage of the worst of what was happening. He said, what you're about to see is darker than even you might have imagined. And I thought to myself, no. What we were watching was whiter than, not darker. Darkness and lightness, as Alandria Williams said in We Are Worthy, are beautiful parts of all of us. When you think about things that are dark, one of the spiritual practices you can do, and this is really fun to do with kids, is to just make a list of things that you love, that bring you life, that are black or dark. Chocolate bars, the night sky with stars. Just make a nice long list of things so that you remember that this story that we're told about darkness is false, that there's just as much beauty and delight and joy in darkness as there is in lightness. We must, and especially timely as we celebrate Dr. King's legacy, we must retrain ourselves around this language. It has real impact on people's lives. A friend of mine who is an anti-oppression activist, a Black woman here in Austin, said on Facebook, after having seen officers in face shields gently holding the arm of a woman in a Trump hat coming down the stairs who had been part of the violence, gently helping her down after this riot. My friend said, remember, our officers don't need to be taught how to de-escalate. When it comes to white folks, they know how to de-escalate. They need to be reminded and taught and ingrained and reprogrammed, as so many of us do, that Black and brown people are worthy, whole, beautiful, sacred. That is what needs to be taught and retaught and retaught. And so I want to share with you a poem that someone sent to me early in the pandemic because they knew I was really struggling. I was laid off from my full-time job as a director of the YMCA because YMCAs were closing. We didn't have the funds. And so most of the staff jobs were eliminated this summer. And that was hard. And I've got my kids at home. Any of you who are still doing online school with your kids at home, solidarity, and the same to folks who are having to go to work and have to worry about their kids going to school. It's a hard time to be a parent. So this poem was sent to me because it has the lines in it, keep going, no feeling is final. My friend wanted to encourage me that no matter how sad or struggling I felt, it wasn't forever. But the rest of this poem says something to me about darkness, and I hope you'll listen. It's called Go to the Limits of Your Longing by Rainer Maria Rilke. God speaks to each of us as he makes us, then walks us silently out of the night. These are the words we dimly hear. You, sent out beyond your recall, go to the limits of your longing, embody me, flare up like a flame, and make big shadows I can move in. Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final. Don't let yourself lose me. Nearby is the country they call life. You will know it by its seriousness. Give me your hand. This country that we call life, that we are living in, we are experiencing its seriousness. We are experiencing the beauty and the terror. We wish we could reach out and hold each other's hands. And so I just invite you to, whatever your image or definition or relationship to the idea of the divine, to take in Rilke's imagining that God says to go to the limits of your longing, which I have felt myself at the limits of my longing for the people in that video, for the world we had before, for the world we are building. I am some days just at the limits of longing for that. It says to embody the divine, to flare up like a flame, to make big shadows God can move in. So when you feel a sense of darkness in the definition we've been taught, a negative sense of darkness, when you feel in pain, depressed, anxious, struggling, I just invite you to come back to an idea of that big shadow where the divine is with you, right by your side. You are never alone, never. And that shadow is cast by a fire. And fire is very much a word that can be used negatively and positively. Our spirits can be on fire, like I sang in that song, Wake Me Up, just that fire to be alive. And then we have very literal fires that are wiping out communities. We have the sense of like, oh, what a dumpster fire 2020 was. You know, there's a lot of different ways to use the word fire. But to imagine some kind of embodied and divine fire that's casting a shadow that is just a beautiful place for you in the divine to grow, like Jennifer said, like a womb, like fertile soil. I love it. And it's ongoing work to reframe those words and to reteach ourselves. We have an opportunity. We really do. And I want to share with you the words of the Indian author and activist Arundhati Roy about pandemics specifically as a portal. She writes, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our databanks and dead ideas, dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. Imagination is on our hearts and minds when we start a new year. So I just want to invite you to think about, what are you ready to fight for? And what could you leave behind? Leave it in 2020. What few things might you carry lightly? What joy practices might you center your year around this year? Like I said, I love that you are a church that watches The Good Place and has that discussion. That's a beautiful thing. Finding something fun and light, some laughter, whether it's a game night, whether it's a walk with friends. For me, it's music. This pain of losing my job has given me time to really spend on my music, and I'm so grateful for that opportunity, and time with my kids, however frustrating that may sometimes be, is also a gift. And so just being able, I think as Unitarian Universalists, being able to hold complexity, to say the world is on fire and so much needs work, and we still have love and we still have beauty. Should we take a breath together? Lastly, I want to share with you a little bit of scripture that came into my life in seminary, and it just broke my heart wide open. I'm going to read to you from the Poverty and Justice edition of the Bible, which I was told Reverend Dr. William Barber uses this edition. And so I ran out and got it because I grew up UU with very little Bible exposure. And I wanted to kind of, increase my literacy across faith traditions, including this one, which is my family and my cultural, heritage, right? I love to highlight books, but I didn't highlight this one. This one comes highlighted about sections that have to do with poverty and justice. So I commend it to you if you are looking for that kind of thing, which I bet some of you are. But the piece I want to read to you today comes from Exodus. And the feminist scholar Carol Myers suggests that Exodus might be the most important book of the Bible. You're probably familiar with the story. The Israelites are on the long, hard journey from slavery through the promised land, to the promised land, through a wilderness, a desert. As Arundhati Roy said, to travel lightly, they could not have been carrying much. But here's a note about one thing that they did carry. It's from the Song of Miriam, chapter 16, verse 19 through 21. After the Israelites had walked safely through on dry ground, Miriam, the sister of Aaron, was a prophet. So she took her tambourine and led the other women out to play their tambourines and to dance. Then she sang to them. Now, as a person who loves music, even before I was a musician, I was like, what? They were in the desert and everybody had tambourines and they made time to dance. And what I love about it the most is we have a female prophet. We're forever trying to break glass ceilings. We have a vice president-elect who is breaking both racial and gender glass ceilings this week. And in her acceptance speech, I heard her talk about a return to joy. And we're talking about joy practices today, so I want to lift that up. But that it says Miriam was a prophet, so she brought her tambourine. That two-letter word, so. Not Miriam was a prophet and they tolerated her tambourine. Not Miriam was a prophet even and she had a tambourine. Miriam was a prophet, so she took her tambourine. And the women had their tambourines and they went out and danced. We need instruments of joy, instruments of inclusion, instruments of spirit to get us through. And some of us, again, have a direct relationship ancestrally and personally to slavery, to the current version of slavery in our prison industrial complex. Others of us may relate in this pandemic time to just the sense of being in the desert or the wilderness. However you relate to that story, I want to invite you to name your instrument. Claim your instrument. What is your tambourine? And share it with everybody else. I will tell you that church is one of those instruments, and I want to urge you to invite more people to come. We have accessibility that we've never had before with these services. Someone can come be with you from Texas, so you can invite your family, you can invite your friends. Imagine if so many more families and children heard Jennifer's words about the beauty of darkness. Let's use this time to invite people in. Thank you for being an instrument of joy in your community and for doing everything that you've been doing to keep this community going during this pandemic. It is hard work and it is so important. Let's celebrate that with our closing hymn, How Can I Keep From Singing?, which is done across the miles by an orchestra and a choir from New York. And I'm just amazed at what people have found that they can do in this time.
My life goes on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, no far off hymn that hails a new creation.
No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love prevails in heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? While all the time the surrounding roars, I know the truth it liveth.
keep singing. For our benediction, by invitation again, everything by consent, but I invite you to put your hands out. If you are with someone in your home, we have learned this year what an incredible blessing not to be taken for granted it is to be able to hold a hand. So if your person is willing, hold a hand. But if you're alone like I am, perhaps envision whose hand you're going to hold when we can all be together again. Let's take a breath. Spirit of life and love, great mystery beyond all understanding, but we feel it and we give thanks. I give thanks for this day. I give thanks for the spirit of community, this community, and the whole of love that surrounds us. Please bring healing and comfort to those who are sick. Please bring joy everywhere. Let us know the light and the dark, both beautiful within us, and may we be able to be a lighthouse to a world on fire. Love, justice, and joy lived through these hands and these hearts. Amen. Blessed be.
We extinguish our chalices today with these words from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremists we will be. Will we be extremists for hate or for love? Will we be extremists for the preservation of injustice or for the extension of justice? May we carry the flame of love and justice in our hearts to guide our answers to these questions until we meet again. At this time in our service, we're going to stop our recording to allow our community to share joys and sorrows in private community. Thank you for joining us this morning.